So you alluded that you're still actively a United pilot.
Yes. Yeah.
When did you go back to doing that? Was that years
That was
and years
2018.
ago? Okay. And what was the impetus for that?
Well, so I got furloughed in 2003, and then at the time, they said, "Hey, here's a month's severance. We're going to call you back in 3 to 5 years." And so good luck. And I'm like, okay, a month is not really that great. And I want to be an actor. And my parents are like, "Hey, we support you, but like, this isn't really a good idea." That's funny. But my dad had a job where he could I could be his assistant for like $100 a day. And he's like, it's super flexible. Just as long as you get stuff done, you could come in at midnight and get stuff done. But if you need to do auditions, like take off and come back and
that's great.
Whatever. So so that was cool to have something paying a portion of the bills. I mean, even $2,000 a month at the time wasn't enough, but tied in with some of the jobs I was getting and, so that, we made it work. And then what was the question you asked?
Why did you go back to United in 2018?
Oh yeah. So anyway, United did call back 3 years later and say, "Hey, you can have your job back." And I'm like, acting is going pretty well. Yeah. What are my options? And they said, you can take a 2-year leave of absence, no sweat. Just write a paragraph of why you can't come back. And so I did that. And then 2 years after that, they extended me 1 more year. That brought us to 2009, which was another recession. I got furloughed again on paper, which didn't really matter that much to me because acting was great. Yeah. And so the second furlough, they're like, "Hey, you can be out 10 years now. And as long as you come back within 10 years, you can have your job back." Because it's, I'm in the union, you're on a seniority list. And so that was sweet. So now I get to do my acting job and I've got this United thing hanging back there. Plan. Yeah. And so basically by September of 2019 that was the 10-year cutoff, which I had to come back to United by then or I'm off the list.
Yeah.
And so in 2018, I'm like, I'll just come back a year early. So it's not even tight. And at the time you could drop back to 0. You could drop down to 0 hours a month. So you bid for your schedule for let's say next month, I would be bidding for November and you would get a full schedule. But then you could just drop stuff. You could drop down to 0.
What do you mean bid?
I'll bid and say, "Hey, I want to go to, I want these trips or I want these days off. I want to get Thanksgiving off." And so you're putting in your requests for certain trips. Maybe you want to go to.
It's not money related. You're just saying what ideal situation would be.
Yep. You're putting in your preferences.
Got it.
For cities and holidays, whatever, days off. And so that's what you would get a schedule. And then I would just say, you know what, if acting was going really well, or my agent, I would say, "Hey, I have these trips, but I'm flexible," which is the key to agents, they're calling you up. "Hey, Mike, can you be here tomorrow at 12? Yep. Yeah, I'm there. No problem." So I would always say yes to everything that my agents asked me to do. And if I had a trip, a flying trip, I would just drop it.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's what I was totally committed to acting, and I would kind of lose some money by dropping the United job that was guaranteed to go on these auditions that weren't guaranteed.
Right.
But that's
how much this month are you flying?
This month?
Yeah.
0. I'm off because I did a couple days on General Hospital. I did NCIS Origins. I'm doing that video game for Sega. And so I don't have time to fly.
So
right now.
Next month, do you have anything?
I have a full schedule which I haven't dropped.
Which you might
yet,
drop.
So, yeah.
What's a full schedule? Is that like 8 flights?
Well, I'm on the 787 out of LA, which so that's that's a wide body, which will go over the Pacific, typically out of Los Angeles. We'll do some to Europe, London, but mostly I'm going to Hong Kong, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Sydney.
But those are longer ones, so it's not.
Yeah,
you can only do like 6 or 8
typically
of those?
you can. Yeah, you could work like 9-10 days a month.
Okay,
and have the rest off. But the trick is that Capital One, I need the beard for Capital One, and with United, you can only have a mustache or less.
What?
So people know, like people that know me real well, if I have a beard like this, they're like, "Oh, you haven't been flying."
That's funny.
But if I'm clean shaven, they're like, oh, where'd you go?
Why do they have a facial hair rule for pilots? That's
started because of
antiquated, right?
It is a little bit antiquated. Yeah, it started because of the oxygen masks. It's typical to firefighters. You have to have a clean seal with that oxygen mask so that no smoke gets in your mask. And so it makes sense. But now they have like a full face mask that is going to seal anyway. So there are pilots. I forget. I think JetBlue doesn't have. They can have a beard. But United's still hanging on to the no beard policy. So,
wow.
So thankfully Capital One will call me a month and a half ahead of time and say, hey, can we want to put you on a veil for these days. And then I'm like, okay, then I drop trips, grow out the beard.
This is fucking insane. Everyone has has a side hustle, but I've never heard of an active pilot side hustle. That's like the coolest thing I've ever heard.
It's so wild.
Okay. In the last year, how many flights have you done? Like 15,
in the last
20?
year, yeah, I would say so.
How many people are coming up to you and being like, are you the fucking Capital One guy? And why are you flying a United Airlines?
Yeah, dude, it's so funny. I have a couple good stories from that. And that ties into this new kind of version of the campaign that we're doing right now. It's at Capital One. But I was like, one of the funniest stories was I was doing a turn in Houston. So LAX to Houston, you get like an hour on the ground and then you fly back Houston to LA. And so I'm walking back to my plane in the terminal and I'm kind of going the same speed as this guy next to me, younger black guy, he's probably 25. And we're literally walking the same speed. So I'm like, I'm gonna talk to the guy and I'm like, hey man, how's it going? And he's like, good. How about you? I'm like, where are you headed? And he's like, LA. I'm like, oh, sweet. I'm probably flying you there, gate 34 or whatever. And he's like, oh, nice. And he kind of looks at me like, little interesting, like he kind of recognizes me or whatever. But keep in mind, I got my uniform on and only a mustache. I think I had a mustache at the time. So like, and the hat, like a totally different look than the Capital One guy. And he's like, LA. He's like, you live out there? And I go, yeah. And he's like, Hollywood. And I go, yeah. And he's like, he kind of looks at me, he goes live on his phone without even like verifying that I'm the Capital One guy. He goes live on, I don't know, Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And he's like, hey guys, so, I'm like headed back to LA and guess who's flying me there? What's in your wallet? And it was so awesome. I just started cracking up and like we put our arms around each other. It was like, oh man, you got to tag me in that. It's so awesome. And it was just so cool that like, so then.
Did that blow up? That video?
No, I don't think. I've never had anything viral. Have you?
No,
are these going viral?
Some of them.
Maybe this one.
This one. It's just wild to me because if I'm a person on a flight and I see you flying, I'm like, what are they filming? Like, it feels like a Catch Me If You Can. Like, you're pretending to be you're acting as a pilot. And it would be so trippy to me to see that.
You'd be the guy that would, like, get off the plane, like, dude, that guy's not a real. He just plays one on TV. I'm out of here.
Yes, it feels like a prank show.
Yeah, where's the candid camera?
That's so crazy to me.
I do have people that like think like one guy. I'm like in the jetway, like after the flight, I'm like, hey, thanks for flying United, whatever. And this one guy's like, hey, he kind of does a double take, and he's like, does anybody tell you look like the Capital One guy? I go, yeah, that's me. And he's like, what? No way, And he was just like floored. And so on one of these shoots earlier this year. I'm telling the head of marketing for Capital One, I'm like telling him these stories, and he's like, God, it's so cool, and it's just interesting stories and everything. And then he's like, I'm looking at you standing next to Magic and Barkley, and I'm just like, that's our Capital One guy, like standing next to two legends. And meanwhile, also there's Jennifer Garner there. There's Sam Jackson. Spike Lee's directing. He's there. Dionne Warwick is there. I'm like, who am I to like be in this group of people? But that started off the wheels of them going, our Capital One guy is in there with all these like A-list stars. And I think it just started them talking of where like now that's the new campaign where, I don't know if you've seen Career Day or, the thing where the guys are like, that couple's like, hey, that's the Capital One guy. Can we get a selfie? Yep. Or the Career Day where they're like asking, it looks like they're asking Jeter questions, but they really want to know from the Capital One guy. So it's kind of cool how those real life stories have weaved its way into the new version of the campaign.
Does like Magic and Barkley know you're a pilot on the side, and do your pilot co-pilots know that you're an actor on the side?
Yeah, well,
I live in this weird like double life.
It's very weird. Yeah, I typically don't tell people that just unless it comes up
organically,
yeah. And so on that set, Sam Jackson was the one that brought it up. Actually, he's like, so I've been doing a little research on you, and it says you're a pilot with United. Is that true? And I'm like, yeah. And then Magic is like, what? And they're just like, everybody's like, what? And it was like, all of a sudden, like, so interesting, because like, and I think, and with those guys, like, I try not to ask them I'm not going to ask Sam Jackson about Star Wars. I'm not going to talk to Magic and Barkley about basketball, like I talk about anything else than what everybody else wants to talk about, and so I think this thing was just really interesting. Like, this guy's an airline pilot and an actor, and then the other way, like it typically when I'm flying with people and they'll say like, they'll find out I was furloughed and they'll be like, oh, like they feel so bad for you. Like, hey, I'm a double furloughed. It's kind of this badge of honor that you wear. And it's like, everybody feels so bad for you. You lost your job for so long. And they're like, dude, what'd you do in the meantime? I'm like, well, that's when I started acting. And they're like, oh, no way. Like, you're the Capital One guy. And they're like, and they start to put it all together. And it's just so funny, to see that like click. Yeah.
What a unique and interesting story. It's
wild.
I'm shocked you haven't done a podcast prior to this, because that's like fascinating. Like, we talk about day jobs and odd jobs on this so much. And there's a classic, waitresses and bartenders.
Yeah.
I work for a tech startup during the day, and a lot of people think that's crazy weird.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
But like,
you got to do something, right?
You have to, because it's that desperation you said earlier.